Hi, and welcome to this tutorial on how to create the physics simulations in the most awesome design by Apple spot that Buck created, where I'll let you see the whole spot on your own, but we're basically going to focus on this section here, where the balls kind of drop in and fall there, and then it tips over, and all the balls fall out. So, again, we're going to do this little section here as the balls drop in, and then when it tips over and falls out. And you're going to see how easy it is to do this with Newton. So there's two things I just want to say in advance. One is I did not create the original animation. I do not know how Buck created the original animation. So what I'm going to do in this tutorial is do an approximation of how I would do this effect. And it's going to be pretty close, but it's obviously not going to be exact. And obviously I'm not going to do every little detail. And I should also note that this part here, which kind of looks like it's physics simulation, was probably most likely done by hand. So that's why we're starting with this section here. So let's just dive right into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the QuickTime movie in for reference, just so that we can kind of follow along. And notice that I've already trimmed the comp in the QuickTime movie just to the section that I want to work in. Newton works its simulations from frame 0 of the comp, so you're going to want to trim your comp to where you want your physics simulation to work. And so even though it's coming in from below, the simulation is going to actually happen on the sort of layer here in the middle. So we're going to basically start here, and what I'll do is I'll start where the balls are already all kind of fallen and into place. So I'm going to zoom in here. So I'm going to just pick kind of here where. So this is a moment where the balls. Now there's one other thing worth exploring is that this is going to happen in two sections. And if you see here how clever this animation is, because it makes it seem like it's all one fluid animation, but it's actually a lot of pieces put together. So once these balls drop, if you really analyze the QuickTime movie here, you'll see that basically all the balls fall off to the bottom, and then we're just left with this one ball. And then this is an easy way for you to be able to like create your animation in pieces and then seam it together later. So then when this one ball comes in, you can just sort of simulate that one ball by hand and have it match up with the rest of the animation. And then again, when this tips over, you'll see here that again, it's sort of like it wishpan. So you see how all the balls kind of follow out, and we just are left with a few balls. And you can see that between the white and the black, they're actually different animations. So that's another great way of making a transition. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to work in two pieces. We're going to first focus on this animation, which is where all the balls drop in. And then we're going to cut and make another animation here where the balls drop out. So back to After Effects. So we're going to pick a place where all the balls are in place. And even though Newton works with shape layers can be a little funky in After Effects. And by funky, I mean sort of unpredictable. They're not going to behave in the ways that you always expect them to behave. So I try to avoid them if possible. So in this case, we're going to just use normal solids with mask applied. So we'll just do a new solid. And we don't need it to be very big, so we'll probably just do like, say, we'll try 200 by 200. And essentially you want it to be kind of big enough for the biggest ball, but you also don't want it to be huge, so you just kind of want to get close enough. And then if you go to the mask tool here, we're going to select the ellipse tool, and here's a little trick. If you just double click on it, it's going to apply the circular mask, well, whatever, it's because the solid was square, it ended up being a circular mask, but it applies it to the boundaries. So that's a nice little tip. So once we have that there, we're going to zoom in, and we're going to reveal I'm going to hit S on the keyboard here to reveal scale. And I'm doing it kind of this way so that I can actually hide the wireframes. I'm also going to lower the opacity. I just hit T to lower the opacity. So I'm just going to do it so I can kind of see. Now, there is one other little trick I need to mention. Notice how the balls, or the dots here, seem a little bit there's like space between them. But when you see the animation, you'll notice that they kind of collide and animate with the space built in. So the way we're going to accomplish that is by taking advantage of another little trick. So the mask shape, which will turn on the boundaries here, and we'll turn on the mask shape. If you can see the mask shape, we'll make it a more obvious color like red. Okay, so you see that the mask shape is currently the size of what we're seeing our blue dot. And that's what Newton will use to calculate all the physical simulations. But if I twirl down the mask here by twirling down the mask, or I could also hit MM twice, so the letter M for mask twice, it reveals all of the things. We can see that mask expansion, and you can kind of like go in or out in the mask expansion. So we're actually going to go in a little bit, and I think -20 seems about right. And what that's going to do is it's going to make it so that Newton calculates the physics simulations to where the mask is, but visually there'll be this kind of like negative space between all the balls, and it'll create a similar effect to what we have here. Okay, so once we have this, we can go ahead and hide this again. So we can now scale this back up. So we want to basically match kind of closely to what we have here. And so then what I would just do is I would now duplicate this layer, move it over here, and then hit scale again. And because that mass expansion thing is already taken care of, I can kind of just focus on here. Now, you're going to want to like vary that mass expansion from dot to dot and whatnot so that you can approximate. Obviously, we're basing it on this design, but the idea is that you would just do your own design. I'm just kind of pointing this out so you can see how this was accomplished. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with having to do all of these dots, so I will just delete these two that I already did and unshine my layers, and you'll see that I've already kind of done all the tracing here. I made red dots before. Sorry, that was a bad place for it to be paused. So as you can see here, I've kind of traced all the balls kind of in place. And then there's two other things that I need to do. Create two more solids, and these solids are just going to be squares and or rectangles, sorry. And I'm going to go ahead and place those rectangles right below the balls. And that's because, again, if you look at the animation, you're going to see that there's this like sort of invisible ceiling here, and that we're going to accomplish that by having these solids. So then what I did is I went ahead and I'm going to reveal my layers again, and I'm doing that by doing Command-Shift-H for hide and reveal, and I believe on Windows that would be Control-Shift-H. And so I have the left solid, which is this one here, and what I did is I moved the anchor point, and by choosing the move anchor point tool, which is this guy right here, pan behind, you can move the anchor point. So as you can see, I put it right below where I wanted sort of the pivot of this to be, which is right below this dot. And then I went ahead and parented this second, what I would call the right solid, to the left solid. And if I reveal the rotation and position, you're going to see that I also went ahead and did the little animation of the kind of things happening. But hey, we're getting ahead of ourselves. That's going to be the next section. For now, we just need to worry about the balls being in place and the solids being in place. Now, this is a good point to make a duplicate of our comp, just so that we kind of have this as a setup in case we want to go back. We don't want to redo all the work with the tracing of the balls, etc., etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and reveal this. I'm going to reveal this in the project. And actually, let me just go ahead and hide these. This is what I was practicing with before I made the tutorial. So this one's called intention. So sorry, let's hide that one. All right, so not to confuse things. So this is the comp that I just was working in. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this. Sorry, edit duplicate. And I'm going to call this, we'll call this 1 here, so that we know this is the beginning stage. So we'll go ahead and open this up. And if we go back and look at this QuickTime, we'll see that essentially all the balls are dropping into place. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to accomplish that the balls drop into place? Well, let's really analyze what's happening here. This little move up we're going to do later. We're going to just assume we're going to do all the animation in place up here first. And if you analyze this, you can see that this kind of bottom row of dots, it's kind of just in place and it just comes up. And these two dots are the first two dots that kind of drop in and bounce in. And once that happens, then we kind of have the rest of the dots all kind of dropping in, kind of in order of where they are in, in height, so that it kind of slowly builds up. So we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. And we're going to isolate. I'm going to go to my arrow tool. I'm just going to isolate. Well, this one actually, if you remember, this one is actually one of the ones that drops in. On the left, these two drop in. So we're going to isolate all of these, sort of, we'll call them bottom row dots. So not that one, but this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Oops. It's easier if you select the little guys first. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Oh, sorry. This one is not part of it. So I'm going to unselect that one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the label color here so I can keep things straight. I'm going to make these yellow, and I'm going to move them to the bottom of the stack. So I'm just going to drag them here. And this sort of organization is just to kind of help keep me sane. Keep going down. I might need to go down and then back up. Put them just above the blue solids. All right, so that's the yellow row. And then I'm going to kind of go to the next row, which is like this guy, not that guy. This guy, and maybe these two guys here. This one's already part of that row. So now these I will make the next color down, aqua, and I will bring those down here. And then I'll just keep doing the same thing. As you can see, oh, it's easier to grab the little guys first. So let's hide the masks. We just want to select the layer. So okay, so that's going to be my next layer, and I'm going to create this one pink, move it down, and then keep going. That one's already part of the pink row. That one's part of the pink row. And these here, we'll create these as lavender, move these down. So let's see, I forgot to select a few of them. So that one is part of the original drop. This guy should probably have been part of the, let's see what's next to it. Oh, that one I forgot a couple of them. I would say let's make him part of this group, which is the aqua group. So, all right. So make these two part of the aqua group and move this down so that it's order. And you're going to see why this is helpful to have them in sort of the same. I need to unselect that one. Bring this down. You'll see why it's helpful to have this all in order like this. And see what else did we forget. I think just the first two. And these will also create a special color of their own. We'll say make them purple or something. And we'll mute and then we'll move these to the very bottom because those are going to be the first ones to drop above the yellow ones. Okay. So the yellow ones are the bottom row. All right, fantastic. So now let's zoom back out here. What we're going to do is we're going to create some keyframes here in After Effects so that the balls are dropping in. So we're going to first go to the sort of like the finishing spot, which is like around here. And we're going to select all the ones that are actually dropping in, which are everything except for the yellow group. So select all of these. And I'm going to hit the P for position. And I'm going to just set a keyframe for position here. So just hitting the time watch there, set a position keyframe for all of them. And then I'm going to move back. And how far I move back is actually not important at this point. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just animate them so that I'm going to move the whole stack up. And I'm holding the shift key down so that this stuff is actually animated directly straight up. Because if you kind of go kind of sideways, the physics, as you know, will probably make things fall off to the right or left, and you kind of don't want that. You want it to fall straight down. All right, so I've kind of moved this all up, and if I look at this just animating down, right now, I'm going to hide these. Right now, they just kind of fall all together, right? Let me just turn off the reference animation. We probably also want to turn up the background to be white so we can kind of look similar. All right, so here we have all our keyframes, and they're all just falling down. All right. Now, what we want to do is we kind of want to stagger the fall so that the first two things fall, just to kind of mimic the style of the animation that they did. And to do that, we're going to use a little script that we have also on aescripts called Rift. Rift is an awesome script. It actually allows you to do a lot of really powerful staggering and shifting and sequencing things with not just layers but keyframes, which is really what we're going to focus on right now. And so and the reason we want to kind of go in order is because we want to have things animate kind of from the bottom up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag all these keyframes and I'm going to move them here to the beginning. And I'm also going to grab the last keyframe and I'll make everything move a little bit faster. I'm just going to move it in so that kind of just drops in at a good rate. I should actually be previewing this a quick. All right, so I forgot. I want to turn off that rotation animation here. So I'm just gonna turn off these keyframes. All right, because again, that's going to be part of the second animation. So I just want to make sure that this is animating down at a good clip, which it looks like it is there. Okay, once I have this, I'm going to select all of the keyframes, and in Rift, I'm going to make sure that in the effects section, I'm going to say turn off all the layer check marks because I don't want it to affect the layer. I just want it to affect the selected keys. So under keys here, you can see I have selected, and everything else is set to its default. And then here in Stagger, which is what I'm going to want to do. Oh, sorry, and I'm going to set the default unit to frames, and I'm going to change the stagger to 2 frames. I want it to kind of stagger all of my keyframes for 2 frames, and I want it to do in ascending order. So ascending meaning like I want it to go from the bottom up. And once I do that, I click this little button to kind of do it, and you can see that it very quickly staggered all of my keyframes kind of in order, and the last one was kind of around the place where I wanted this whole thing to end. So if I preview this now, you can see that it's already approximating the look of the final piece, obviously missing the very important bounciness and physics simulation, but the core animation is there. And again, we have not really done a lot of work. We've been using all these tools to help us do this a little bit better and a little bit faster. So we're done with Rift. Thank you very much, sir. And in the original animation, there's a little bit of a further delay between these two first guys and everything else. So I'm just going to select just the keyframes for everything else. So kind of go there and just wrap all these guys. And so again, everything but the purple ones. And I'm going to just delay all these just a little bit longer so that it feels like just the first 2 things come in first. Probably even delay it a little bit further. So now it's just the first 2 and then everything else. Okay. So again, if we refer back to this, you'll see it's kind of like, you'll see these first 2 things, and you see the first 2 kind of animate in. So they're the first 2 balls here that I've already kind of animated in, and then kind of like the rest of them kind of fall in a bit of a deluge. Okay. So now that we have our base animation, we are ready for Newton. So Newton is selected from the composition menu, not the effect menu. So just remember that. And we just go into Newton. So here's the Newton interface for those of you who are not familiar. And here you have all your layers, which are called bodies in Newton because that's how physics simulations work. And what we're going to do is we're going to select everything that is at the beginning, and that we don't want that to move. We want that to be static. So if you go up here to the type, you want to select type static. well, actually, before we do that, let me just show you what happens if I don't do that. Basically, everything is kind of in the live Earth world. So if I hit play, everything just kind of falls because there's gravity in this world, and everything is by default set to be a dynamic body. So that means it's just going to fall. So what we want to do is say we don't want these to fall. We want these guys to stay in place. So we're going to make them static. So now if we preview this, you're going to see that those kind of don't move, but these still become dynamic. But the problem is, even though this looks really cool, it turns into a bit of a mess when it falls because all the balls just kind of fall according to how physics would work, which would be a great animation, but not what we're going for right now. So how do we get these guys to fall kind of in that prearranged shape that we set up already? Well, there's a special body type, and what we're going to do now is select all of these guys, and I just literally drag and select. And there's this special body type called Animatic. And Animatic is a really cool body type because what it does is it allows all the bodies to take the motion from any keyframes that you might have set in your comp, but also apply some physics simulation. And then there's these two controls called Animatic damping and Animatic tension that allow you to kind of dial in how much physics and how much, keyframe from your comp is applied, and it's done through both tension and damping. So you can really play with these two settings and get some really perfect kind of feel. In other words, add enough physics so that it feels physics, but still have it adhere enough to what you set up in your comp so that it actually moves how you want it to move. So let's zoom back in here. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and preview this. And what we might need to do here is, I forgot one important thing. So notice how it's bouncing. These are bouncing back up, and you're like, what's happening here? Why is this not the shape that I did? Well, it's because, let's go ahead and quit Newton here. It's because after the last keyframe, Animatic says, let's go back to that sort of physics simulation world. And what we really want is we want it to kind of stay in the shape that we defined. And the way we're going to be able to do that is just kind of go back in time way after we're done and select all of the keyframe, all of the layers that we animated. This even more. And just set one more position keyframe. And I'm going to do that by holding Alt-P. And by doing Alt-P, I set a keyframe in place for all of these. I believe I could have also just hit the keyframe button here. That's the same difference. Anyway, all that does is it actually just says stay in place. Now there's a very big gotcha. If you go into your After Effects preferences, you can see here that there's a preference called default spatial interpolation to linear. So you just want to make sure that that is checked. If it's not checked, what you're going to get is you're going to get a Bezier animation. And the way to fix that is to just select all of your position keyframes, right click on them, and say under keyframe interpolation, you want your spatial interpolation to be linear. If you hadn't set that preference, it's probably set to current settings, which is just going to cause trouble. So just make sure all your spatial interpolation is set to linear. Once you have that set, we can go back into Newton, and you'll see that all our animation is kind of already remembered because by default, if this is checked, auto load and save settings, everything that you've set up in Newton will be remembered from your last session. So if we go ahead and preview this, now you're going to see that they're actually falling in place to our prearranged position, which is awesome. It looks almost, just almost done, right? So rewind this. So what the only thing I would adjust to this is that to me it seemed like these two first guys bounced a little bit more. So if I grab, let's zoom back out. If I grab these two balls, so I'm just selecting them here, and it might not be obvious, but I'm just selecting the two purple guys, the two purple layers. I'm gonna turn up the bounciness to be 0.5. And I'm also going to turn up the density. Higher density means that it's the body has more mass. So think of it as like it's going to do more of a thud. It's going to be more definitive fall. It's not going to be as light and feathery. It's going to fall at the same rate, but once it falls, it's going to, think of it as like a sumo wrestler with higher density. So I'm just going to double the density to 2. So when we preview this, you can see that it falls now with more authority, and you know, it still bounces. Maybe we could even go a little bit more bounce. Let's try 0.7. So let's preview that. And as you can see, what's really cool about Newton is you can just change settings and see the results right away. So let's just go really crazy so you can see what I'm talking about. So this is a bounce of 2. So maybe the density is too much here. Let's try 1. Yeah, there you go. So you can see what more bounciness is causing. So I actually liked it with the density of 2 and the bounciness of 1. Let's try that. Yeah. So that feels pretty good. And let's just preview this again. Again, you can tweak this to your heart's content. We're just sort of showing you how this can be done. And once that's done, one last thing is you can see the counter here. When you see the preview simulation, you can see kind of where it ends, which is around there. So we'll say about at 110. We'll say 115. So just here in the export section, just enter 115 as the end frame. And you want to apply it to a new composition. So we're just going to hit render. And we're going to get ourselves a new comp. So if we look up here in our project panel, we're going to see a new comp called 2, which is now what Newton just created. And you can see that all of the position keyframes are there. So if we preview this, let's zoom out so you can see this better. So there we have it. Pretty cool, right? Again, could tweak it a little bit, but you get the general idea. And to match the animation of what's happening, because it appears that it's coming in from below. So if you look at it there, how it's coming up. So we're just going to go ahead and select all. Well, first we're going to do a new null. So it's just added a new null. And we're going to go ahead and select all and just parent everything to that null. I think it even parented this QuickTime that we don't want parented. So we're going to go ahead and animate the null from where we want it to end, which is like about here. We'll go ahead and set a position keyframe there. And then at the beginning, we'll have the null, the whole kind of rig start from below the comp frame. So if we preview this, you can see what's happening. Now, of course, pretty much everything that was animated in here seems to be animated with the most awesome animation curves ever. And another tool that we have on aescripts that can help you with this is Ease and Whiz, which I'm sure some of you guys have already heard of. But Ease and Whiz takes this boring animation here of the null coming up. And what we'll do is we'll say, so there's different easing types from more extreme to less extreme. So Expo is the most extreme. And in this case, I think it's a pretty extreme. And we just wanted to affect the out point, or sort of the ending of the animation, and affect all the keys. So we'll go ahead and select all the keys. And we'll hit apply. And just like that, you can see now when it animates in, it feels, you know, it comes in with like force, but then slows down very gracefully. And it feels a lot more like this animation. See that? All right. So again, you can tweak that some more, but for now, this is pretty good. So we have this coming in. So now we have a little problem that it seems like, well, we see these balls here and we don't want to see them there. So that's going to be pretty simple, because if you see it up here, we have this moment where they're off the comp area. So we can use that to kind of be our endpoint. So I'm just going to select all of our layers except for the 2 purple layers, which are the 2 ones coming in. And we're just going to trim the endpoint to that point. So I'm going to hold the Alt and open bracket so that that's now our endpoint. Okay. So if we hide our layers, you can see now that we don't see any of these layers. We just see the layers after, you know, once they're dropping in. And then we have another problem, which is here we see these dots here, which we don't. We kind of want them coming in from the top. So let's just go to after the move is done and essentially just unparent both of these two purple layers so that now they just kind of drop in and then they bounce in as the animation comes in. So if we preview that, so we can see now how that works. Does that make sense? All right. Now, the last thing, of course, is we just simply need to turn off these two blue solids and put in our text there, which, you know, abundance here with choice. But I'll let that be your homework. So essentially, you know, but the reason that the blue solids were there were for to help the animation, but you can see how easily we can just simply turn them off and, you know, still get the animation. Now, once we're done with this, we can move on to the second part, which is going to be actually much easier. And again, we're going to duplicate this so that we have this saved. We're going to go ahead and duplicate the comp. So now this one's comp 3. And in this comp, we're going to delete all of the keyframes. We're going to go to the sort of the finished position. And we're going to go ahead and first we'll delete the null. We don't need the null anymore. And we'll just delete all of the position actually select all and hit the letter U to reveal all of the keyframes. And you can see that there's position and rotation keyframes. So I'm just going to drag through all of them to just delete all of the keyframes. So now we don't have any keyframes. And we're also going to move the endpoints back into the beginning. So if we turn this back on, oops, undo, just the reference movie. So we're going to go see here kind of where we want the animation to begin. So we kind of, again, you want to trim your comp to where the simulation is going to begin, which is basically right around here. So I'm just going to set my, I'm going to hit the letter B for the beginning of the work area, and I'm going to make the work area go all the way to the end. And I'm going to turn on, again, my two blue solids, because that's, again, how I'm going to kind of get them all to drop, all the balls to drop. And as you can see here, the dots are not perfectly aligned. If I had played enough with the Animatic settings, I could have gotten it to match perfectly. But for this demo, it's close enough. And plus, you know, you obviously would want it to be your own thing anyway. All right, so now what we need to do is, once we've set the work area, we're going to go ahead and right-click here. I think you can also do it up here under composition. Say trim comp to work area. So now my comp is trimmed so that right at the beginning of this is where the simulation is going to start, which is what Newton needs to work. So now we can turn this off again. And what we're going to do is, or well, let's just turn it on just long enough. Let's turn on the opacity on both of these blue solids. And the first thing you notice is that with choice seems to drop. That might be more obvious over here. So if we step through it, you can see that it looks like the position drops in Y a few frames, and then it rotates down, and then abundance seems to rotate as well. So we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to take the right solid here, and right at the beginning, we're going to set position and rotation keyframes. And I'm just going to go down a few frames, and I'm going to knock down the position just a couple of frames, and then the rotation, so that, you know, opens up the floodgates, if you will. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And then once that happens, oh, and of course, I mentioned before, I had set the anchor points here in the top corner, and I parented, well, I should go back here before I do the rotation. I'm going to parent the right solid to the left solid. So the right solid is parented to the left solid. So now once the right solid has rotated, I can then also rotate the left solid so that it kind of helps the drop there. Okay, so now we have this animation. Again, turning off the reference movie, right? So that's basically the animation that I've set up here. And by the same trick that I showed before, because what's going to happen is we're going to set these guys to actually be a new type. Well, actually, I'll just go ahead and show you. Make more sense. So now we're back in Newton, and because it's a new comp, it's a new scene, we kind of have to reset everything again because everything will just fall, right? So I want these two, the two blue guys, to be a new kind of system, which is kinematic, which is similar than It's similar to Animatic, but the difference is that it's not going to try and stay close to your original animation. I'm sorry, it's not going to vary from the original animation. It's actually going to follow the original keyframes exactly until the last keyframe. And after the last keyframe, it's going to go fully into the physics of the system. So if we preview this, you're going to see that at the beginning, it does the keyframe animation exactly, right? But then they kind of both fall, which is not what we want. We kind of want it to do what the reference does, which is kind of just kind of tilt down, but then stay in place. And the way we're going to solve that, I'll go ahead and quit out Newton, is just do the same thing I did in the other section, which is kind of just go back in time here and just set keyframes for everything in place. And again, you want to make sure that if I go, you can't see this, but I'm going under, if I'm right clicking here, I'm saying keyframe interpolation, and I want spatial interpolation to be, oh, it's not letting me set it because rotation. You want your position, just precision to be keyframe interpolation. You want position to be linear. Okay, this is very important. All right, so once I verify that that's linear, now I'm going to go back into Newton, and it's already remembered my settings. So now if I preview it, you can see that now it stays in place because you can see there where the last keyframe was. So I can actually probably go and make sure that those last keyframes are further down. So all the way to the end here. So now when I go back into Newton and I preview this, you can see that basically this animation is done for us. And all of these other guys, I just left to their default setting of being, if I select them all, you can actually do another cool trick, which is select one of them and then hit the letter C for color, and it will select every other item of the same color, in this case red. And you can do things like, you know, adjust the friction and the density and whatnot, but they're all set to be dynamic by default, which is what we want them to be here. So again, you can play with bounciness, friction, and all that stuff, but I think the default setting here is pretty good. And, you know, again, and then, of course, they did a camera move in their piece, which is why it seems to float up. But you basically do the animation in place, and then you just take the whole comp or something, and then you just animate it to make the transition. But anyway, then again, you just kind of preview this. You kind of pay attention to what the last frame is, which is there about 110. So I'm just going to go say 115 and then hit render. And again, we'll have now a new comp. So it's 4, and you'll see if we preview this. So what we'll want to do is we'll want to turn off the 2 blue solids so that they're hidden and preview this. And that's it. We have ourselves the second animation. And of course, you could create now, let's say, a new comp and then have 2 followed by 4. Oops. So let's turn off 4 first and just go to see where this ends. And because we used one into the other, this end right here will match perfectly. So if we preview the whole thing together, it'll just seamlessly go from one to the other. So even though we did it, oops, I forgot to turn it on. That would be helpful. So even though we did this in 2 separate Newton comps and 2 separate simulations, you can see how you can have them all feel as part of one. So that's it. I hope you can see how easy it is to do real true physics simulation animations using Newton and After Effects. And of course, this piece is full of really beautiful designed animation and a lot of really great detail that makes it super awesome. So I'm not trying to imply that you can create something that great this easily, but the physics simulation part is pretty easy now thanks to Newton. So hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you guys the next time.